What do you guys want as far as Carr's future?
S- So what's funny
Sorry,
is
I had to
no,
do
no,
it.
no,
I
no.
had
That's
to do
great
it.
because we want to talk about it. When you were talking about Bisaccia, Micah, I kind of realized it's the same position with Carr. Like, because if you look at it, I think, and you took the top 10 list, right? I think if you would probably put Bisaccia somewhere in the middle or out a little outside the top 3 or 4. You could kind of look at it the same way, where it's like, hey, we want these 3 head coaches. We're going to try the best that we can and still interview Bisaccia. If we get some one-off O coordinator who's being groomed but without experience, we'll bet on Bisaccia. It's kind of like Carr. It's like, hey, if you can get Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or Rodgers and the price is right, great. Or there's this draft prospect, even though this class doesn't have it. And if not, no, we're fine with Carr. It's kind of silly that way. But I didn't answer your question. So, Micah, I'll let you answer Jake's question directly about Carr and his future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, that we're in a very interesting situation because Carr is a top 10 to top 12 quarterback right now in the league with the way he has been able to play. Now, what's interesting is that over this stretch of us winning games, Carr hasn't really played that great. He just hasn't played very terribly like we saw in a lot of the losses. But
Yeah, that's true.
he's played well enough, and he's come up clutch when he needed to come up clutch. You know, he's making plays when he needed to make plays, but he wasn't that first 5 games Carr where he was throwing for over 300 yards every game. Also, too, I saw a stat that I didn't realize, but I was also kind of like, well, that's crazy. But Carr, there was no game this year where Carr threw for 3 touchdowns or more. And there was 28 other quarterbacks in this league that threw for 3 touchdowns or more at one point in the season. I think that with where Carr's at, he played well enough to warrant an extension, but also hanging on to him feels like, once again, if he can take that next step, that's a different story here.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like sticking with Carr, we're kind of moving laterally and hoping that we can move forward with that situation. But he's got one more year on his contract. There is zero guaranteed money. And honestly, he's played well enough to be a quarterback that's not playing for zero guaranteed money this year. So I think there's a good chance that we go into this offseason with Carr kind of putting his foot down a little bit on some type of extension, and at least trying to get some money to play for this year for the most part, because he's played well enough to deserve it. But it's also like, where do you go from here on whether a head coach, a GM wants to continue on with him, wants to get their own guy. Is Mark Davis going to bring someone in based off of that, whether they want to continue on with Carr? I think him going in and getting us to the playoffs and finally playing in his first playoff game kind of extended that talk of like, all right, well, I think we got to extend him now. So
Yeah.
I love Carr. I think he has all the tools to be able to play at an elite level, and we've seen that. We just haven't seen consistency from him, and we've seen him more consistently play at a mid to above mediocre level in regards to like helping us stay in games and getting us to points where he can make plays to get down there so Carlson can kick a field goal. But when there were times, and maybe it's a scheme thing, maybe it just wasn't right with Olsen calling plays and all this stuff, and maybe it'd be different if we had a offensive coordinator that had more of an open playbook that let him just sling it down the field. But I don't know. It's a very interesting situation. Where we sit right now, I say give him 2 more years. So he's got a 3-year contract and see what happens. Bring somebody in, draft somebody so you could at least work on grooming somebody so we're not in this limbo stage. Because you look at it and say, all right, well, where do we go from here? If we are going to move on, what do we do? Do we let Mariota play? Do we just draft somebody and hope that they pan out? Or do you go all in to try to get, not Deshaun Jackson, a Deshaun Watson, or make a play at Aaron Rodgers, or go for a Russ who wants to explore his options? It's just those are the only going with one of those 3 guys is kind of the only way to take that step forward from Carr. And I don't know if it's necessarily in play a whole lot. Maybe Watson,
Yeah.
just because we don't really know what's going on with his situation. And,
Yeah.
he very well likely never play in Houston again, just as much as he might start this coming season. So I don't know. I don't think I even answered your question, but
No,
we
you
just
did.
talked a lot. But
What would let me ask you this, would your answer be the same if we fix the right side of our O-line as far as Carr?
well, I think the thing with Carr is that so much has to be right for him to succeed, and if we can make things right around it, then that would be great. We saw that he can perform really well when he has an elite O line in front of him. That is probably still going to be a question mark for the next few years because we're hoping that Alex Leatherwood comes about. And granted, we had a lot of injuries that kind of screwed us in that situation, but yeah, I mean, I think that with Carr, things have to be at a top 5 to top 8 type of unit around him at every level. Top 5 to 8 offensive line, maybe a top 10 in like overall like weapons on offense and stuff like that for him to really exceed and hit that high level that he can play at, because he's going to have his faults. And I mean, everybody does, obviously, but the last 6 games of the season, Daniel Carlson scored more points than Derek Carr did.
Yeah,
And that's a rough
true.
thing to look at when, your kicker is the leading scorer on your team throughout the year, but also outscores your quarterback
Yeah.
in the last 6 games. So I'm at a very like in between stance because I don't want to just cut ties and go backwards, but at what point do you need to do that is the big question. So
I think it'd be really cool. Mike, I think you said this a second ago, to see what Mariota could do. That would be really cool to see what he could do for the Raiders offense. I don't know if that's not even a possibility or not. I have no idea if that's what they're even thinking. But instead of drafting someone, I would love to see what he could do.
Yeah, I think it's an option if they part ways with Carr, get some draft capital, and use Mariota as the bridge quarterback. I think that's going to be the best way that you can see what he's got. I think he's very exciting, but does not. There's a reason we signed him as a backup. I think with where the NFL is going, I think you'd have to be pretty dang smart in your game plan, and your strategy, where you kind of scheme around his strengths and then kind of around him in general at times. You'd have to be able to run the ball pretty dang well. He doesn't have the elite arm talent that warrants, an actual like a top 10 quarterback. So I think we'd be in a good situation if we moved on from Carr and then just kick the tires on Mariota. But and maybe this is just my opinion, but I think we already know what kind of guy he is. We already know what kind of player he is, what kind of quarterback he is. So I think he would add another element to our game or to our offense. But I think if we get down 2 scores, good luck, because his game is a slow, methodical, take your shots when you can, but a lot of it's off that read option, using his feet, which is a strength, and we try to use him in those situations this year. But it's interesting. I mean, we do have him under contract, or I think he's expiring. He has an expiring contract because we signed him 2 years ago to just a 2-year deal. So they'll have to address that in free agency. So I don't know, man. It's kind of an impossible situation because you look at the team overall, and I think we're in a reloading kind of year, but we're in a rebuilding decision-making situation with Carr in a sense. It's like you're either rebuilding or you're going all in. Like Micah said, he's not going to take anything that's not guaranteed. It's all like, what do you think the Raiders are going to do with Carr? It's like, what do you think Carr's going to do with the Raiders? He's going to put us in, a body bag and say, hey, you're going to pay me. I'm on a contract extension. I have no guaranteed money. Look what I did with this team, with this organization that was just, in the trash all year with all these different distractions, and I got us to the playoffs. So it's going to be a tough decision, man. But it won't lack. We keep saying this, but it's not going to hurt us for our content because there's always going to be something to talk about over the next couple months. So yeah, I don't know. I don't envy the decision makers there because it's going to be a tough call. But I think, Jake, to your point about Bisaccia, if they move on from Bisaccia and you bring in a GM and a head coach that want to move on from Carr, it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers in the organization. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds, because without a clear plan, like if they were just the worst team, if they were the Lions or whatever, whoever has a first overall pick, or the Jaguars, and there was a top QB prospect, it would be easy, right? It's like when the Colts moved on, they're not the same player. When the Colts moved on from Peyton Manning, they had the number 1 pick with Andrew Luck, and Manning was coming off an injury. Those things are easy, right? This isn't very easy because we're going to be picking in the 20s. There's not top end quarterback talent. There's some good starters that can develop into some top 10 quarterbacks, maybe, but you got what you have right now with Carr. And I think the best thing that we can do is build around him in free agency, in the draft, like you guys are talking about with the O-line, and bring in someone from an O coordinator or a head coach that really can get us into more creative plays, be able to balance the rushing attack, because Carr's a good quarterback. He's like a Tannehill, though. It's like he can be really dangerous and good if he's got a solid defense. I think solid enough defense and some kind of running attack that actually threatens a team. And you saw that we were able to open it up a little bit more in the passing game when Jacobs got going, but he's just not, there's not a lot of guys out there, but he's not the one that's going to be the reason that, you win all these games, even with a bad, no weapons. He's not a Rodgers. He's not a Mahomes or Herbert, so, which is fine because it's a needle in a haystack trying to find one of those guys. But I think if it were me, I think my narrative's changed a lot, but I think we extend them. I think we go all in and try to develop, because I think our team right now is good enough to progress to where we need to go over the next couple of years, just based on the foundation and where, overall where we're at. I think we still need to add some more blue chip players, but I'm also not going to sit here and say Carr is our savior and we better do everything we can to keep him, because it's just not the case. But the situation is where you're good enough right now, where with the right head coach, the right scheme, and some, actually nailing a draft pick or two within the first 2 rounds would be neat. Then I think, I think that also, sorry, I keep going off here, guys, but you think about Carr too, where if he's not on our team right now, how attractive is our head coach opening? You know what I'm saying? For people coming in, they're going to come in and say, hey, like, yeah, we might have to make a decision on him, but that's top 12 quarterback. A lot of teams would love to have it. If you're just doing the numbers, 18 other teams would love to have one of those guys, So I think we're in a good situation because of him, but they're going to have to make a decision one way or the other. And a lot of what's attracting coaches to the Raiders is probably Carr and some of the blue chippers that we have with Crosby and Gakwe. We have to make a decision on Jacobs. Obviously Waller, didn't mean to not mention Waller, but Jacobs coming up on an option. I don't know what we're going to do there. So we'll see. I'm done now.